management by rural communities. Mouthful. And so the socioeconomic part, we have a sociologist involved and the economist involved, and we're trying to figure out what would influence adoption of resistance management practices at a community scale. The main goal of the economic analysis is to say what are some cost-effective alternative interventions to manage pest resistance, and compare what would happen if we do nothing, what would happen if we do some reasonable options that might be on the table as resistance develops. So we have to start with that first thing. What's the status quo? So we've spent a lot of time trying to understand what it looks like in Harrison County budget-wise. We have state-level budgets, and we wanted to narrow those into Harrison County and say, what does it look like here? And then go to this long and short-term comparison. What if you make decisions based on the short run versus long-run assessment of different management practices? And specific, again, to each of these pilot areas. So this is taking more time than a typical general economic analysis because we really want it to be personalized to each pilot area. So here's our general approach, and I'll be honest, we're kind of in the middle here, even with Harrison County, because steps 1 and 2 take quite a bit of time. And step 1 was, what are the current practices for corn and soybean? Getting these baseline budgets, and we call these enterprise budgets, and then looking at what-if scenarios. And I'm going to show you those for Harrison County. Well, what if things develop? What could we do? What options are on the table? And then let's figure out what would happen to the budgets if we had to pursue those what-if options. And then looking at the dynamics. What if we project the what-ifs versus the baseline? And what does that mean in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years out? Maybe we can make a short-run decision that looks great for 1 year. But what are the implications if we do this in 10 years? There might be a higher current cost, but pays off in 10 years if we invest in this decision and then mitigate resistance. And so we're looking at the end of the day, we want to also take this more in the, what could we do to incentivize people to make that right choice in the long run versus short run. So specific to Harrison, we've met with the team, I probably should put a number to it, we've met with the Harrison team several times to get feedback on this process. We initially met with them and told them we need to get numbers, and they were very gracious about opening up about were our cost estimates, were our inputs correct, what numbers we had. We know that every farm is different, and that's a hard part about getting a budget. We wanted to make a flexible tool that they could adjust, but we wanted to have a reasonable starting point. So did our numbers we put in for yields make sense? Did our numbers we put in for each input make sense in the costs? So we went several iterations. We would take their feedback, go put them into the spreadsheet, bring back numbers. And then we tweaked it until we got settled in on what we felt were a decent set of baseline budgets. And with those, we built them in this flexible spreadsheet model so that at the end of the day when this tool comes out, when we get done with the tool, each person could go in and modify the key assumptions to themselves. Well, my yields aren't really like that. I can tweak it a little bit. Or this input cost, I can get it cheaper than that, or it's a little more expensive for me now. So you can adjust those, but we want to have a good starting point. But the focus being on weeds, we did set up that there would be 3 different weed pressures that you could start with, low, medium, and high. And when we get to the dynamics, we end up talking about, well, what would it look like if you take different paths? Would that jump you from a low to a medium? Could it take you from a medium back to a low if you get really aggressive over time? So we have these 3 categories that kind of keep things binned to look at the what-ifs. Now, after several conversations, we had to narrow down what were the main characteristics to bin these budgets. So looking at it from a weed perspective, what are the kind of the 3 things, if you look at Harrison County, that could be separators based on the cost that you'll see and then the weed approaches that you would take. So we looked at soil type, and we were told there were 3 different types, and these are the names we bin them in: river bottoms, hills, and upland. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys in this room, and you would know which one you would bin yours in. Tillage practice, no-till, conventional tillage, and then crop rotation. Here focusing on corn, soybean. And so we have different spreadsheets and different budgets, whether you're corn on soybeans, or soybeans on corn. So here are the 15 baseline budgets. There's a lot of stuff going on, but you'll see we have some that are not applicable. As Mike just said, tillage in the hills. We just said for a baseline scenario, that's not applicable. But what we do have is that we have a spreadsheet, which I'll show you here in a little bit, that you can manipulate for just a single year, 3 different weed levels if you were on a rented acres and an owned acres. So all of these you would go in and you get to choose. Well, which crop rotation am I part of? Where's my location? And am I in tillage? And then am I a renter or owner of this acre? And then is it low, medium, or high pressure?
One other thing I'll say, the good part about this tool is a lot of times there's a stigma when it comes to weed pressure, okay? I'll be honest with you. Like, do I have low weed pressure? Do I have medium? Do I have high? Well, I don't necessarily want to tell you what I think I have, but this is what I actually have, okay? This allows you to go by yourself and work and be like, I have low pressure on that field. Well, I actually have medium pressure, what I would consider on that field. But you don't have to like go to the co-op or tell somebody, yeah, I have medium weed pressure. You don't have to do that. You can say, you can honestly evaluate these things yourself, put it in the bin and see, okay, where am I at on there? Because we all want to have, when we get to like some of these costs, we all want to have the highest yields. We all want to have low weed pressure. Well, sure, but you know, you might want 80 bushel soybeans. Your ground might not ever give you 80 bushel soybeans. You might be sitting at 60s or 50s or 40s or 30s, you know? So you can use your own reality for that and some of those numbers. Okay,
so to get one of these single numbers, behind there's a spreadsheet that looks like this. You might need to zoom back out a little bit. Try to snapshot these into a small space. This says corn following soybeans, river bottom, conventional tillage. And so all of those ones we had on the previous slide are developed from a sheet that looks like this. So you can see all the numbers that are underlying this that go into making that calculation. Now, most of these are able to be changed to your own farm on a separate page, and so they all change. And some of them are built into the model. And so there will be very clear instructions on how you could use this tool. But you'll see there's a lot of different inputs, and these inputs were all things that we went through with the team multiple times saying, do these make sense? Do you guys remember those meetings where we're just talking about it? Okay, yes, on average that makes sense, but maybe a little higher, lower here. And so over time, we have developed what we feel are like our final baseline for Harrison County. And so this is what we're using moving forward. And so when you go to do the spreadsheet moving forward, it will call this once you've made your adjustments.
So yield is always the one, so I'll just use it as an example right here. So river bottom, conventional tillage. You're tilling on the river bottom. Low weed pressure, our actual yield for bushels, we got 225. Medium weed pressure, 214. High weed pressure, 203. And you might look at me and say, well, that ain't real. Okay, that's where you can put in your own numbers. So low yield pressure, you have weed pressure, you have no loss from that. If you have medium weed pressure, we say, well, you lost 5% yield based on weeds. And you might say, maybe, or no. But if you have high pressure, it might be 10% yield that you lose based on weeds. You might not think that's a overall in the field, but if you take a pretty big chunk out of the middle, that can add up pretty fast. If you're averaging in 50s and that part goes down to 25 based on just solid weeds. Okay, so it can sneak up on you pretty fast.
Okay, so we took this baseline framework. These are annual 1-year snapshots of what's going on and said, okay, now let's look forward. What if? What if this develops? What if we have to make changes? So we had a long discussion with the team in Harrison about potential what ifs. What are things that they could do? And we decided to build a model where you could basically identify, well, which baseline budget am I starting with? Again, which of those 15? And then allow for, some cases you're going to use multiple of these different strategies moving forward, and sometimes you might just use one. Again, adjustable. So we decided to categorize these. We like the names, but they're just names. Yeah. So we have these tweaks called, our small preseason adjustments. Things done ahead of time that you know you're going to do, that are going to be adjusted because you have some resistance or you want to handle the weeds. Then we have what we call Band-Aids. You're going to Band-Aid the problem in the in-season. And this is something that's like a 1-year Band-Aid that you're going to adjust to. And then these deep structural changes. These are things that basically we said, this is altering the way that you grow. You had planned how you're going to grow, and now you're making a big change. It doesn't mean that cost-wise that this is an increase in cost. It's just a big change compared to that. And these things, the order in which you might do these are not necessarily 1, 2, 3. So we want to have options for you to explore, what if I do this? You can punch it in, new numbers come out. And you can look at this at a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year. Mm-hmm. So here is the what if list for Harrison County that's been vetted by the team. So our tweaks are, we're deciding we're going to add a tillage pass. We're going to increase our cost. So we're going to adjust our burn down mix. add a pass of herbicide, use different seed herbicide technology, which comes with a cost. These are different options you can choose, how aggressive you're going to be. You're going to have a 1-year change from soy to corn. Just 1 year, decide that you're not going to go to the soy, you're going to go to corn. The Band-Aids, rescue spray, doing some testing, hand weeding, and different levels of hand weeding, and doing some cultivation with your own equipment. And then the deep changes, again, you're making a change to how you've been farming for years. Now you're going to change your whole herbicide application rate onto custom or vice versa. Changing the 10-year crop rotation. The one we currently have modeled is if you're in like a corn-soybean rotation going 4 years of corn and then back to corn-soybean again. So we have different options that we're considering. That's the one we've modeled so far, right?
Yep.
Yep. Change in tillage, something nobody really wants to do, but might have to be done if we get too much of a problem. The lovely cleaning of the equipment. Again, something nobody wants to do, but if it gets bad enough, and you'll see some of the quotes later from the southern producers, it would be something that would be on the table if the problem gets bad enough. Introducing alfalfa and then changing in row spacing.
So the way I look at these is, these are things, this is what I would consider all the things that we look at on a spring basis, and we say, what are the little changes that I want to do to improve my system? Okay? You know, maybe we can switch the burn down, adds a little money, you know, switch chemicals. These are the things we do all the time. The Band-Aids, these are the things that none of us want to do, but unfortunately we have to do at times. All right? Nobody wants a rescue spray. Nobody wants hand weed. No one wants to do these, but sometimes we have to. And these are, you're fed up with what you got, we need to make a change. It just has to happen. Either I'm tired of doing it myself, so I'm going to hire somebody, which happened a lot with dicamba, or vice versa. Some of those things, you know, I'm tired of, sorry the co-op guys, I'm tired of working with the co-op, I'm doing it myself. You know, either of those things, those are the changes that we're looking at in there. It's kind of we're making a sweeping one.
And again, the model that we're building right now and the tool we're building is going to allow you to do multiple of these at once. Maybe you know that you have to adjust your burn down mix and do a couple of other things. So you are going to be able to do multiple things, though there are combinations we will restrict that just don't make sense. Like there's a couple things you won't do together. Mm-hmm. So we'll make sure that it's default so you're not putting in options that are not realistic. So what we're doing now is just that modeling, building that tool. We've sat down and thought through how we want it to work. Worked with Mike about what makes sense, what's user-friendly, because we know those spreadsheets can get complicated. What can I tweak? What can I tweak? Where do I interpret things? And then looking forward, how do we take this and say, well, what is the economics in the long run? Looking at what if we do nothing, what if we continue where we are, what if my neighbors continue what they're doing, and what effect does that have on resistance, versus what if we adopt some of these other strategies. Right now, what if we do just a bunch of Band-Aids? What if we do a structural change? And so at the end of the day, we really want to look at comparing the cost, putting numbers to it, and allowing then you to have the tool to do that yourself.
For more information or to get involved with the Harrison County Pest Resistant Management Project, visit protectiowacrops.org.